Hi, greetings to everyone out there in YouTube land who is watching this. This is my little corner of the internet. I usually talk about tarot cards and mysticism. And this evening, I want to tackle the different themes and topics around basically creativity after trauma, trying to be someone who can be vulnerable emotionally after experiencing different kinds of trauma, and it's like creativity and self-expression. And in part one, I was saying a little bit about what my journey has been and how difficult it has been for me to be able to let myself be expressive and creative, because I felt really rejected because of bipolar disorder, and I felt not just misunderstood. I felt like when I was trying to express myself, it was completely rejected. And so in the first video, I talk about how even when someone is out of it, they need compassion, and they need to have that compassionate listener. And this is an idea from John Weir Perry. And we need to feel accepted for who we are. And even if you go through something extreme, like an extreme mental health episode, you deserve to feel understood, and you deserve to feel this warmth, this warm-heartedness from the human community, and you deserve to feel completely accepted as who you are. But unfortunately, what I faced is feeling completely rejected for who I was. And that was what I experienced. A lot of it was maybe unintentional, like a unintentional attitude from someone. But I still experienced the sense of complete rejection and outright criticism. And it's been really difficult to be emotionally vulnerable whatsoever. And creativity and creative projects are basically like my thing now. And yet I've been paralyzed the past couple years because of these huge experiences I had where I felt like I should just shut it down in terms of self-expression and creativity. And kind of like the thing that almost kind of encapsulates this was I made an unfortunate move. I wrote the rough draft of a really cool novella. I probably wrote it in maybe between 2010 and 2012. It's hard to say, maybe around 2012. I was writing down different ideas. I wrote a couple pages at a time, and I have a number of pages for the novella now. So unfortunately, I was trying to have more of a good relationship with my dad. So we're like, oh, we'll do this writing project together. And it was completely, it was a mistake on my part, because basically, even though I wrote something completely fictional, he thought it was like nuts. And that was my worst fear, right? It's like, oh, people are going to think I'm crazy, even though it's fiction, which doesn't make sense that you would reject something that's fiction. And so my dad was like completely critical of my rough draft and asked me if I was like feeling okay basically. And it was like my worst fear come to light. And of course, looking back, like, he's just a complete asshole. And I don't know, like, it's weird to try to confront people or not when they're in denial of being an asshole. I guess people are in denial of that. But I don't know, because I don't care. Or it's not worth confronting people who aren't willing to acknowledge things. And yet, like, I don't want to be passive aggressive, like making these videos about how my family sucks. I mean, so it's weird, right? It's this weird balance of like wanting to be authentic and not wanting to be like in someone's face like you suck, like, because that's kind of what they did to me. But then is it passive aggressive to just talk about it? I mean, I'm talking about my experience, but I have no idea. It's kind of a messy situation, right? Because I want to be on good terms with people, and yet these are the people who kind of hurt me the most when I most needed help, and it completely sucks. I don't know what the resolution to that is. Anyway, so just part of the deal with this video is to help me get my sense of self-expression and creativity back, and just like have this openness and clarify things for myself. And so I'm not going to read the whole novella, but I did write this really cool synopsis that covers the main themes of the novella. And this is basically what I wrote originally to get the ideas out when I originally had the idea, maybe in 2011 or whenever it was. I can't remember exactly. So now I know that people write all kinds of fiction. People create all kinds of art. It's not wrong. As long as you're not hurting yourself or others, there's nothing wrong with creativity. And so just because some people have no imagination, like my dad, he has no imagination, he doesn't like fiction, he's just in general a very critical person, right? And he's not interested in personal development, so I don't see, he's not going to change anytime soon, or if ever. But that's just my example, right, of the person who sucks and is very critical in my life. And it's just good to clarify that it doesn't even matter. There's always going to be those people who are critics, and maybe that is my worst nightmare, but it doesn't matter because creativity isn't wrong. Anyways, all this is so obvious, but the problem is, because it was in my face, like this person who I thought was important to me in my life because of that role of parent, I thought they would have some wisdom, and basically they don't. But I get tricked by that role, like, oh, maybe this person will be okay now. No, they're not. And it was my worst fear come to life. So the point is, it's left me paralyzed. I haven't worked on my novella basically in a couple of years. I've tried to pick it back up, but I wanted to self-publish it on Kindle, and I'm going to. But for a number of years, I've been completely paralyzed by it because of all these issues of the mental health trauma that I faced and having no support. I don't want to say no support, right? But basically none of the compassion that I needed, and none of the warmth in terms of like warm-heartedness and compassion. I didn't receive that, like I said, until I met my husband Joey. And like that was me like completely putting Joey as a priority. Like I was like, I've got to meet someone who's not like such a cold person, you know? Unfortunately, I did meet him. He's a very warm-hearted and compassionate person, and I really value that, like most people do, I think. So part of the point of all this, get all these themes out there that are important to me, and I want to express myself. I don't want to feel shut down. I want to be okay with possibly being misunderstood. And it's kind of important also because when you've gone through something like a mental health trauma, it's great to use creativity to deal with some of those emotions and some of those ideas. And in facing mental health trauma is incredibly extreme, right? So you need art and creativity in general. We all need art and creativity, and especially in the face of trauma, you really, really need art and creativity. So besides the fact that like, even if there's someone who's supposedly close to you, don't listen to them. Like it's not my mistake, but I wish I could have let it all go sooner in terms of feeling paralyzed about my creativity because of one stupid naysayer's comments, even if it is someone from my family. I should have just let it go, but it's been really personally difficult. So it's time to move on. It's time to feel my sense of compassion for myself, how important creativity is to me, feel that, and also being able to express myself, and it's time to move forward. Because I feel like these days, with the house that I've created with my husband Joey, I feel like I am able to thrive finally and have that sense of acceptance for myself that I could never find in the past. Okay, so I'm already at like 9 minutes, but I'd like to get back to this other thing. I'd like to share the synopsis of my novella because it's really cool. It's a really cool novella with really cool extreme ideas. It's basically like a dreamscapes thing. Like I'm really interested in mysticism, and then with fiction, you can just just turn up the volume, right? You can just let your imagination run wild. And it's one of the greatest things ever to have an imagination and to have creativity and to have expression for your creativity and imagination. And you don't have to hold back. Like, obviously, maybe in real life we have mystical experiences and then we have to integrate it into real life in different ways. And the nice thing about fiction is that you can play around with these ideas and just let what happens happen. Like, when you're writing, it's really interesting how you can have a little kernel of an idea, and then as you're actually writing, it unfolds and unfolds, and you just see where it goes. And it's really cool. It's almost like this subconscious dream type of imagination that kicks in when you're literally writing on paper or the computer. Something very magical and really cool about it. So, I don't know if I'll be able to get through the whole synopsis. It's only a couple pages, so I might stop and kind of describe more of what I'm talking about as I read this. If you have any comments about how you are enjoying your creativity, of course, feel free to leave them either here or on Instagram or wherever. Just write them in your own journal, of course. Okay, and take a sip of coffee. Okay. So the novella, the working title is Lily the Mystic. And I basically picked the name Lily because it's just this, I wanted just a short girl's name that I could write over and over again. That sounded just kind of pretty, and basically that's it, like a feminine name. So it's Lily. I guess like the flower. So I never have that great of a reason to pick certain names. I'm actually not even that good usually with titles. Like, I usually don't title the songs that I write until I have to, and then I'm not even that enthusiastic about the title itself. Okay. This is my novella synopsis. Here we go. Lily, the main character. Lily leads a very exciting, surreal, and mystical life. She is able to meditate and do strange yoga, and she can do all sorts of other strange, mystical feats. And in this way, she is able to transport herself to completely different locations. And basically, the locations she goes to are dreams, dreamscapes, and what could be considered different dimensions and alternative realities. So the whole book starts out with kind of a common theme or a common a common premise. She's lost basically most of her memory, and she has to piece it back together. So she's traveling in these different mystical ways for all different times and locations. Somehow she leaves herself enough information at each location and time so she can keep going. As she drifts in and out of so many different dimensions and times and places, she's having a hard time knowing any longer which, if any of them, are the real dimension or the real reality. So there's all these different characters that she meets. All the different characters have different fascinating and weird stories. She is typically herself in each situation. Like, she has a certain persona or like ways she identifies. Then other times she's just in these totally weird situations. And there's some of these I haven't even written yet. Like, she could feel herself almost like an out-of-body experience where she's kind of peering through the eyes of a different character, even though usually she's I mean, it's kind of like ideas that I'm really engaged with. So the character isn't me, but it's almost like a persona that I would really value. So the character is basically my age, even though she has her own trajectory. Okay, so there's an undercurrent to all this. It says in the synopsis that I wrote, as she puts together pieces of the puzzle, she begins to realize that there's something really negative under the surface, and she's getting like a thread. There might be a common thread to what she observes is going on, even though there's all these different locations. Okay, so this is a part that's pretty heavy. So one of the things that a lot of people have trouble dealing with is the Holocaust. And I'm not trying to piece together a real Holocaust narrative, because there are a lot of people who have written really profound books about the Holocaust. So one of the issues about my novella is the idea of reincarnation and past lives. So basically, Lily, the character, has had a past life in the Holocaust, and it's kind of haunting her in all these different dimensions because she's never fully dealt with that. So at one point, she's in either World War II era. Oh, excuse me. Okay, so the past life would be in World War II era Germany or Poland. But what happens is she takes a tour of a concentration camp in what would be considered the present day for her. So this is like the pinnacle of the book, right? She is walking around the remains of the concentration camp. She's going there to do a meditation to honor the people who passed away there, the people who were killed there. This is the pinnacle of the book. So she has this moment where she realizes her past life, and she has to come to terms with it. It's kind of interesting. When I was writing this, I thought that it would be really sad, and it is, obviously, but I thought that she would have to face her past life in this way that would be devastating, and that's what the character thinks, right? She can't face it. It's too much. But by facing it, so when I was writing it, like I said, like your writing takes a certain creative flow, and the way that scene plays out is different than I originally expected it would. So it's really difficult for her to face this. She was in the past life, when she was in the death camp, she was a 12-year-old girl, and the community that she had been brought up in was already killed in the concentration camp. So she's one of the last people from her community to pass away in the concentration camp, and she realizes no one's going to remember her. And I think that's one of the difficult themes in this novella, is this idea of horrible atrocities, and how, besides the fact that we can't emotionally face it very easily because it's so horrible, there's also the idea of how atrocities break up our normal sense of being able to remember things, and being able to pay our respects to people who have died. Like the really important ways that we honor life are just, it seems like, I've never personally lived through any atrocities, but this whole idea with this novella is to attempt, at least in the small part, to look at some of the themes about how difficult it is to face different things. So So you find out in the book that the whole reason she's been traveling in different dimensions and different alternative realities is that she basically got stuck, and because she never fully was able to let go when she passed away in the concentration camp. And then when I was writing it, when I wrote it, I realized that as she was passing away in the concentration camp, she did experience, even though no one would remember her, it was really completely sad. At the actual moment of death, she was full of hope. Not just that, like, death was actually peaceful for her. And she had hope for everyone. Basically, she had hope for humanity, even though it was very, very dark times. And it was difficult to have hope. So anyway, it makes sense when it's written out. So I guess another theme that in my life is coming to terms with death. And obviously, I've never lived through horrible wartime atrocities. But I think it's kind of haunted me in a way. I used to read a lot of young adult fiction that was about the Holocaust. Not a ton, but I read a handful of books for young adults about the Holocaust. And I guess it really stuck with me. And it was always really sad to me, obviously. But also, I was like, well, if this is all there is, if we just have to face death as being the end, it's too sad. It's too much trauma. It's too much to deal with that people could just be gone. So my personal spiritual beliefs, I don't know if I believe in literal reincarnation, but I do think we have a soul, and our soul can travel to different dimensions and kind of go forward. And that the reality that we're experiencing on planet Earth right now is one reality, but it's not the only one. So I think that's what appeals to me so much about this novella, is that it's this place that I can play with all these ideas and write them out and be like, okay, if this was a scene in life, what are some different ways that would play out? So it's really cathartic in different ways. Okay, so that's like some of the most important ideas about the novella, and a lot of the bulk of the writing is a little bit more cheerful than that, because she gets to meet different characters in the dreams she's having, and a lot of the characters are really nice, and which is really cool. But then after she lets go of that incarnation that she had in the Holocaust, she symbolically faces a figure who personifies, he personifies basically hopelessness and misery. It's not a light book, but it's okay. I think it's good to write things that are extreme and difficult, because I think that's one of the ways that we cope with different things as human beings. Okay, so I'm gonna read this part, because this is I haven't actually written this part except for the synopsis. This is kind of cool. So she's just let go of her incarnation. She released what she was holding on to at the concentration camp, but then she's catapulted into a dreamscape. Okay. So here we go. So Lily meets these figures who are human looking, but they actually symbolically represent a sense of justice and a sense of knowledge. Lily asks these figures, how could it ever have worked out that so much evil could come and ravage the world? And how did this happen, that all these atrocities happened, specifically the Holocaust? At these questions that she asks, justice crumbles and evaporates, and knowledge looks at her directly with a glimmer of something awful in his eyes. He tells her, there is no justice in this world. Don't you know that by now? Why don't you just accept it? You hop around in your mind from one place to another, trying to escape your inevitable fate of pure misery. Why don't you just give up? There is no peace for you, no place for you to run to or to hide. And then Lily responds, you aren't knowledge at all, are you? And then it is revealed that this figure is actually this personification of misery and horror and just this horrible hopelessness. And the figure tries to trap her there in hopelessness, but he can't. And then, so she's facing this figure, and there's like one time she faces him, and then when she finally faces him at the end, she's in a dream, so she's just alone in the middle of a stormy ocean with no boat and no life preserver. She's just there treading water in the middle of this dark, bleak ocean. Obviously, it's symbolic of misery. All of a sudden, she can finally remember all the things that were being suppressed, that she couldn't access. She remembers everything. She remembers all of her incarnations, all of these dreams and these different dimensional worlds that she's been going through. And obviously, it's completely overwhelming, right? So she's just like, but she's treading water, so she can't be so overwhelmed and upset emotionally because she's still treading water. And basically, so that's not the worst. She's in this ocean of misery, right? And Lily knows that she must accept everything she has seen and learned, but at the same time, she must find some sense of peace that will allow her to let go of her horror at the evil and the misery in the world. And then she sees a small boat approaching her, but it's not anyone to assist her. It's this ominous figure that we were introduced to. The ominous figure who used to be disguised as knowledge, but he's misery and hopelessness. He wants her to acknowledge that the world is doing the best that it can, and that the huge levels of evil and misery in the world must remain as the inevitable status quo. That's what he wants her to acknowledge, this hopelessness and despair. There is nowhere for Lily to swim to. But then she suddenly becomes even more calm, and she gets a sense of, in her mind's eye, she has her own sense of things. Her mind all of a sudden is a little bit calm. And it says, through her freestyle approach to life, that depends on her own natural sense of something like intuition, she gets this spark of a certain positive feeling that she's creating this spark. Lily gets the feeling that all each person has to do is to embody hope and love and the best of life. That includes, obviously, respect and dignity for everyone. And that's what she wants to carry on. And she knows to face down this despair, that's what she will do, is have hope and compassion and love and respect everyone's dignity. So with this spark of her own hopefulness, she is no longer afraid of this ominous figure who's in the boat getting closer. Lily knows that she has absolutely been embodying hope as she traveled through these different worlds. She has been hopeful the whole time. And for this reason, the ominous figure can't actually do anything to harm her. He's trying to convince her to be hopeless, but he can't make her be hopeless. So I'm going to write out this really creepy conversation that they have. So, as the nasty figure of despair realizes that he is unable to sway her to his side, he just starts trying to get her because she's swimming and the boat is like getting really close to her. But luckily it's a dreamscape. So she's starting to lose her swimming ability because of all this. And then I don't know if this will change when I actually write it out. It says, Lily feels a fiery sense of determination coursing through her veins. And so she finally remembers that she is in some type of dream world in this ocean of misery. So instead of trying to swim away, Lily decides in this dreamscape to dive under the water and swim downward. She keeps swimming. And in that dreamscape, she basically goes. And then she wakes up in the present day, which she didn't even know was going to happen. She didn't know if she was just dead or what. But she does wake up in the present day. And then the last part is peaceful. It says, the next morning, Lily sits calmly, gazing out at this beautiful scene. It's just like nature. She's on a porch, sitting there outside, sipping a cup of tea. She finally feels this warm, glowing sense of peace. In a way, she has learned a lot. But in another way, she knows that there's still more to learn. She breathes slowly and calmly, enjoying this sense of peace. She knows that in this version of reality, things will be more steady and have more of a sense of stability to them. She's not going to keep falling through time and space quite as easily as before. She will be able to stay in a stable sense of reality to live out her days. And then it says, as she looks back over her experiences, which seemed so real, but now are beginning to seem a little bit more foggy and more dreamlike. Most of her mystical tricks won't work out in this stable sense of reality. Lily has found this really majestic sense of peace that she was always hoping for. But she knows she's going to keep going and keep on learning things. In some ways, she doesn't know exactly what will happen next, but she knows that all she can do is enjoy her peace. Okay, so that's the some of the main aspects. Basically, it's basically towards the end of the book, because those are some of the big things that come up. She's kind of trying to avoid for the whole first part of the book. Thank you if you have listened to this video. Thank you so much. I hope you have fun with your own sense of creativity, and whether that's writing or art in different ways. It's so fun to share different ideas and to be open, and so I guess the main idea of all of this is that I hope you find the ways of self-expression that are right for you, and that you feel supported in that. And even if you don't always feel completely supported in that, I hope you still find the creativity that's right for you, and that you keep being someone who's creative, because that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to kind of be determined, and I'm going to keep creating writing and music and art, and I don't know. That's about it. There's so many different themes. I don't know how to wrap it all up, but I think self-compassion, or just compassion in general, goes really well with creativity, because it's pretty vulnerable, but it's okay. And then I could just repeat everything I've said like 5 more times, because these ideas are really important to me. Okay, thank you so much for tuning in to these videos. I really appreciate it, and I hope everything's going well for you. Thanks.